Black woman rejected on blind date on her birthday, until a girl asked, "Can you be my new mom?" Look, I'll be blunt. When my cousin said she was black, I thought she was just, dark-skinned. Derek didn't even bother to lower his voice in the crowded Chicago restaurant. I didn't expect something so obvious. Camila Williams, 29, remained motionless in her chair at the elegant bistro where she had arrived exactly 15 minutes earlier. It was her birthday, and she had canceled plans with her family to be there. The navy blue dress she had carefully chosen that morning now felt too heavy on her shoulders. "I understand," she replied, her calm voice contrasting with his harsh tone. "And what exactly did you expect?" Derek laughed, a harsh sound that made a few heads turn. "Someone more compatible with me, I work in finance. I earn 6 figures. I need someone who won't attract attention for the wrong reasons." He gestured vaguely in her direction. "My colleagues won't understand." What Derek didn't notice was the peculiar gleam in Camila's eyes. They weren't tears. It was something much more dangerous, the serenity of someone who had been through worse situations and knew exactly how to deal with predators disguised as civilized people. "Your colleagues," she repeated, tilting her head slightly. "From Sterling and Associates?" Derek paused, surprised. "How do you know where I work?" "Female intuition," she smiled, but there was something icy in that smile. The waiter approached, clearly uncomfortable with the tension at the table. Derek dismissed him with an impatient gesture. "Look, I'm not going to pretend this can work. You seem polite, but my world is different. Too complex for a black woman to understand." Camila finished, her voice still soft as silk. "Exactly." Derek didn't even try to hide his relief at not having to explain. "Nothing personal." Camila nodded slowly, as if processing important information. In fact, she was. Every word that man said was being carefully filed away in her mind, along with the name of his company and various other information that Derek would never have imagined she possessed. "Well," she said, rising with an elegance that made Derek frown, "thank you for your honesty." That's when Derek noticed something that made him hesitate. Camila's posture was not that of a humiliated woman. It was that of someone who had just received exactly the ammunition she needed for something much bigger than he could comprehend. As Derek walked away, laughing on the phone about another disastrous date, a little girl with curly hair approached the table where Camila was still sitting, thoughtfully fiddling with her cell phone. "Why are you sad?" the girl asked, her big brown eyes shining with curiosity. Camila looked down and smiled, this time, a genuine smile. "Actually, sweetie, I'm not sad. I'm planning." What no one in that restaurant knew was that Derek had just made the biggest mistake of his life. And if you're enjoying this story of how a simple blind date would become the catalyst for a revolution that would change not just one life, but an entire corrupt system, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what comes next will leave you speechless. The little girl with curly hair, who couldn't have been more than 4 years old, tilted her head with the innocent curiosity of children. "What are you planning?" Camila smiled genuinely for the first time that night. "Justice, little one. I'm planning justice." The child's mother quickly approached, embarrassed. "Sorry, she's very curious. Come on, Annie, leave the lady alone." But Annie didn't move. Her big brown eyes studied Camila with a seriousness impressive for someone so young. "You look like my favorite teacher. She also gets sad sometimes, but she always protects us from the mean boys." Something in the innocence of those words touched a wound that Camila had learned to hide very well. She bent down to be at the girl's height. "And do you like her?" "Very much. She's the best in the whole world." Annie paused, as if making an important decision. "Can you be my new mom? My mom lives in heaven now." Annie's father appeared at that moment, visibly embarrassed. "Annie, you can't go around asking people that. I'm sorry. She lost her mother 6 months ago and—" "It's okay," Camila interrupted gently, still crouching down. "I'm honored she thought of me." As the family walked away, Camila noticed that Derek had posted something on Instagram. The photo showed her empty table with the caption, "When your cousin says her friend is exotic, but forgets to mention that she's a quota #ChooseBetter #high standards." In the comments, his colleagues at Sterling and Associates laughed like digital hyenas. "Bro, you always escape these traps. Quota policy even on Tinder now, lol." That's why I only date blondes from the country club. Each comment was a new layer of poison, but Camila felt no anger. She felt something much more dangerous: absolute clarity. What Derek and his fraternity buddies didn't know was that Camila Williams wasn't just a rejected black woman. She had a PhD in behavioral psychology from Harvard, specializing in power dynamics and institutional discrimination. She had spent the last 5 years documenting patterns of prejudice in corporate environments for a study that would involve more than 15 large companies in Chicago. Sterling and Associates was one of them. In fact, Derek had just handed himself over on a silver platter to the most perfect case study she could imagine. A senior executive at one of the city's largest brokerage firms, publicly documenting his prejudices, providing names of colleagues involved, and connecting personal behavior with corporate culture. While driving home, Camila called her research assistant. "Jessica? It's me. I need you to speed up that investigation into Sterling and Associates. And I want everything on a guy named Derek Morrison by tomorrow. Anything specific you're looking for?" Patterns. There are always patterns. At home, Camila opened her laptop and started doing what she did best: research. Derek's public profile was a treasure trove of problematic material. Photos at exclusive parties where there wasn't a single black face in sight. Check-ins at clubs known for discriminatory policies. Questionable comments on posts about corporate diversity. But it was when she accessed Sterling and Associates data that the true extent of the problem was revealed. The company had an impressive track record. In 5 years, only 2% of employees hired for senior positions were black. 0 black women in leadership roles. And a very high turnover of minority employees, who always didn't fit the company culture. Camila smiled as she organized the data into meticulous spreadsheets. Derek had just become the unwitting protagonist of a study that would destroy not only his career, but the entire structure of systematic discrimination at Sterling and Associates. At 2 a.m., her phone rang. It was a message from Derek. "Hey, no hard feelings, right? Nothing personal, I just prefer my own type. You understand." Camila screenshotted the message and added it to the file that was growing exponentially. Then she typed back, "Sure, Derek. I understand perfectly." And she really did understand. She understood that Derek Morrison had just signed his own professional death warrant. She understood that this simple blind date would be the catalyst for exposing an entire system of institutional discrimination. And she understood that sometimes justice comes disguised as the oppressor's own mistakes. What Derek didn't know, and would find out in the worst possible way, was that Camila had been rejected before. By arrogant executives, by corrupt systems, by men who thought she was too easy to dismiss. And each rejection had only fueled a determination that was now about to turn into the perfect storm that would destroy not only a prejudiced man, but the entire structure that protected him. On the computer screen, the evidence piled up like pieces of a deadly puzzle. And at the center of it all, a little girl's innocent question echoed in her mind: "Can you be my new mom?" Because maybe, just maybe, when the smoke cleared and justice was served, Camila would discover that it wasn't just Derek and his corrupt company that needed a lesson. Maybe she herself would discover something about family that she had never experienced before. The next morning, Camila woke up at 5:30 a.m. as she always did. Not out of anxiety, but because strategic minds work best when the world is still asleep. While making her coffee, she checked her phone notifications. Derek had posted 3 more stories on Instagram. The first showed a selfie of him in the office with the caption "Monday Motivation. Another day building the future #blessed #Sterling life." The second was a photo of the company parking lot, deliberately focusing on the luxury cars with a comment: "When you work with quality, surround yourself with quality #high standards #success." The third made her smile, a photo of lunch at an expensive restaurant, tagging 5 colleagues from Sterling and Associates. "Thanks for the contact list, Derek," Camila murmured, screenshotting each post. At 9 a.m., Jessica called with the report Camila had requested. "You won't believe what I found. Derek Morrison isn't just a problem employee. He's the informal leader of a group they call among themselves the Old Boys Network within Sterling." "Go on." "They have a private WhatsApp group called Real Men of Sterling. 47 members, all white men, aged between 28 and 55. And Camila," Jessica paused dramatically, "they document everything. Comments about female employees, quality rankings of female candidates in interviews, even bets on who will get to date the interns. Camila stopped typing. How did you get access? My cousin works in the company's IT department. Not officially, but she has ways. The important thing is, we have screenshots of 2 years of conversations. All admissible in court. Send everything to my encrypted email. And Jessica? Does your cousin need a better job? Actually, she has a PhD in computer science. She's only at Sterling because she needs the company's health insurance to treat her autistic daughter. Write down her name. We'll take care of that too. At 11 a.m., Camila was at the Carter & Associates law firm, sitting across from a woman who immediately made her smile. Rebecca Carter was known in Chicago for 2 things: winning impossible cases and having zero tolerance for corporate injustice. Dr. Williams, Rebecca began, leafing through the dossier Camila had prepared. This isn't just a case of individual discrimination. It's civil RICO, conspiracy, pattern of discrimination, hostile work environment. We're talking about a lawsuit that could result in systemic change. That's exactly what I want. Rebecca smiled like a shark who had just spotted blood in the water. And the beauty of it is that they documented everything. It's as if they wanted to get caught. Meanwhile, Derek sent Camila a message. You seem cool even though you're different. If you want a second chance, I promise I'll show up this time. Maybe we can work something out. Camila screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Rebecca with a note. Attachment A. Continued harassment after the meeting. That afternoon, Camila held a conference call with 3 people Derek would never have imagined in her network. Dr. Margaret Washington, the first black woman to head the Chicago Board of Trade's Compliance Department, James Chun, senior investigator for the State Human Rights Commission, and surprise of surprises, Annie's father. Sorry to interrupt, said a familiar voice when Annie took the phone during the call, but is this the pretty lady from the restaurant? Camila smiled genuinely for the first time in days. Hi, Annie. How are you? Fine. Daddy said you help people like my teacher. She also gets sad sometimes because some parents are mean to her. Annie's father returned to the phone, clearly embarrassed. Sorry, she's very direct. I'm Dr. Marcus Thompson, by the way. I work in corporate psychology, specializing in institutional bias. When Rebecca Carter said you needed expert testimony. Wait, Camila interrupted. Dr. Marcus Thompson? Did you write Unconscious Bias in Financial Services? Guilty as charged. And you're the Dr. Williams who demolished Peterson's methodology on implicit association testing. Your Harvard study is required reading in my courses. Small world. Getting smaller. Especially when we have a common enemy in institutional discrimination. That evening, Derek posted a LinkedIn article titled, Maintaining Professional Standards in Modern Workplace Diversity, essentially a thinly veiled manifesto about why forced diversity lowered company standards. Within hours, it had dozens of likes from Sterling and Associates employees and comments that ranged from dog whistles to outright racism. He's making this too easy, Rebecca texted Camila. It's almost not fair. But Camila knew something about men like Derek that most people missed. Their arrogance was also their greatest weakness. They genuinely believed they were untouchable, that their networks protected them, that their version of quality was universally accepted truth. At 10 p.m., she received one final text from Derek. By the way, told some friends about our date. They want to know if you have any hot friends who are more traditional. You know, girls who know their place. Camila stared at the message for a long moment, then calmly added it to the file that was now 3 inches thick and growing. Tomorrow, she would make some calls that would change not just Derek's life, but the entire culture at Sterling and Associates. What Derek Morrison didn't realize was that his simple rejection of a black woman had triggered a response that would expose 30 years of systematic discrimination, destroy multiple careers, and result in the largest discrimination settlement in Illinois corporate history. And the beautiful irony? He was documenting his own downfall, one arrogant post at a time, believing he was building his legacy when he was actually building his tomb. As Camila reviewed the evidence one final time, Annie's innocent question echoed in her mind, "You can be my new mom?" Maybe, when all this was over and justice was served, she would have the space in her life to explore what family could mean. But first, she had a system to dismantle, one perfectly documented piece of evidence at a time. The countdown to Derek's professional execution had begun, and he was completely oblivious to the fact that every text, every post, every arrogant assumption was another nail in his very expensive coffin. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. And Camila Williams played to win. The next morning, Derek Morrison walked into Sterling and Associates feeling invincible. His LinkedIn article had garnered over 200 likes overnight, and his Old Boys Network group chat was buzzing with congratulations about his brave stand for professional standards. What Derek didn't know was that at exactly 9:15 a.m., while he was grabbing his third coffee of the day, Rebecca Carter was walking into the offices of the Illinois Department of Human Rights with a manila envelope thick enough to choke a horse. "This is the most comprehensive discrimination case I've ever seen," she told Director James Chun, spreading printed screenshots across his desk like a deadly game of solitaire. 2 years of documented evidence, pattern discrimination, RICO violations, and the defendants literally confessing to their crimes on social media. Meanwhile, Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Camila. "Hope you have a good day at work today, smiling face with smiling eyes." He snorted, showing the message to his colleague Brad. "Look at this. Still trying to get my attention. Pathetic." What Derek couldn't see was the storm that was about to break over his perfectly styled head. At 10:30 a.m., Dr. Margaret Washington from the Chicago Board of Trade was reviewing Sterling and Associates trading licenses. At 11:15 a.m., 3 journalists from the Chicago Tribune were fact-checking a story about systematic discrimination in financial services. At noon, the IRS was opening an investigation into Sterling's hiring tax credits, specifically how a company claiming diversity hiring could have such statistically impossible demographics. The first crack in Derek's perfect world came at 12:47 p.m. Derek Morrison. The woman at his desk wore a badge and carried a folder. "I'm Agent Susan Rodriguez from the Department of Human Rights. We need to speak with you about some allegations." The entire trading floor went silent. Derek's face flushed red as conversations stopped and heads turned. "I'm sure there's been some mistake," he stammered, his usual confidence evaporating like morning dew. "No mistake. We have documented evidence of discriminatory hiring practices, hostile work environment violations, and conspiracy to deny equal employment opportunities." Agent Rodriguez's voice carried across the suddenly quiet office. "You have the right to legal representation." Brad, who had been laughing at Camila's text message an hour earlier, was now sliding his chair away from Derek like he had a contagious disease. By 2 p.m., the Chicago Tribune article was live, Sterling and Associates, inside the Old Boys Network, that systematically excluded minorities. The article included screenshots of the WhatsApp group, Derek's LinkedIn manifesto, and recorded testimonies from 3 former Sterling employees who had been documenting discrimination for months. Derek's phone started buzzing incessantly. First his mother, "Derek, what is this article saying about you?" Then his ex-girlfriend, "Are you seriously this racist?" Then his college roommate, "Bro, you're trending on Twitter and it's not good." At 3:15 p.m., Derek was called into the CEO's office where Mr. Sterling himself, a man who had built his reputation on progressive business practices, sat behind his desk looking like he wanted to crawl into a hole. "Derek," Mr. Sterling's voice was ice cold, "effective immediately, you're terminated. Security will escort you out. Our legal team will be in touch regarding the damage your actions have caused this firm." "But sir, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've single-handedly destroyed 30 years of reputation building? That your documented racism has cost us 12 major clients in 4 hours? That the IRS is now auditing our diversity hiring claims because of your group's activities?" Mr. Sterling stood up, his face flushed with anger. "Get out. Now." The walk of shame through the trading floor was brutal. Former colleagues who had been slapping his back that morning now avoided eye contact. The security guard, ironically, a black man Derek had never bothered to acknowledge, professionally escorted him to the elevators. As the elevator doors closed, Derek's phone buzzed one final time. Another message from Camila. "By the way, I'm Dr. Camila Williams, Harvard PhD in psychology, specializing in institutional discrimination. My research on Sterling and Associates will be published next month. Thank you for being such a perfect case study." Derek's hands shook as he stared at the message. He frantically Googled Dr. Camila Williams Harvard, and felt his stomach drop as page after page of academic achievements, published papers, and speaking engagements filled his screen. TED Talks about unconscious bias. Congressional testimony on workplace discrimination. Award-winning research that had changed policy at Fortune 500 companies. The woman he had dismissed as just another quota hire was one of the most respected experts in the country on exactly the kind of behavior he and his colleagues had been exhibiting. By 6 p.m., Derek's LinkedIn profile had been flooded with comments calling him out. His Instagram posts about maintaining standards were being shared with captions like "This you." His dating profiles had been screenshot and circulated with warnings to women about his character. Rebecca Carter called Camila at 7:30 p.m. with an update that made both women smile. Sterling and Associates just offered a 7-figure settlement to avoid trial. They're also implementing mandatory bias training, diversifying their entire leadership team, and establishing a $2 million fund for minority scholarship programs. But the most beautiful part came the next morning when Derek, unemployed and unemployable in the Chicago finance scene, read the final article in the Tribune. Local restaurant becomes symbol of hope, how one woman's rejection led to industry-wide reform. The article featured a photo of Camila at the same restaurant where Derek had humiliated her, but this time she was surrounded by the Sterling and Associates Diversity Task Force, announcing new hiring initiatives that would create opportunities for hundreds of qualified candidates who had previously been excluded. And there, in the background of the photo, was little Annie holding her father's hand, both of them smiling at Camila like she was exactly the family they had been searching for. What started as Derek's casual cruelty had become Camila's catalyst for systematic change. And the most devastating irony? Derek's own arrogance had provided every piece of evidence needed to destroy not just his career, but the entire culture of discrimination that had protected him for so long. As Derek sat in his empty apartment, scrolling through job listings that would never call him back, one question haunted him. How had a woman he thought was beneath his notice orchestrated his complete professional destruction without him suspecting a thing? The answer was simple but devastating. He had confused education with intelligence, position with power, and privilege with protection. And that fatal miscalculation had cost him everything he thought made him untouchable. 6 months later, Camila stood in the same restaurant where her nightmare had become her greatest victory. But this time, she wasn't alone. "Can I have the mac and cheese with extra cheese?" Annie asked the waiter, swinging her legs from the booster seat. She wore a bright yellow dress and had insisted on bringing her stuffed bear to celebrate. Dr. Marcus Thompson, who now insisted she call him Marcus, smiled as he helped Annie arrange her napkin. "What do you say, sweetheart?" "Please and thank you." Annie beamed, then turned to Camila. "Mommy, did you really make all those mean people at Daddy's work change their rules?" Camila's heart still fluttered every time Annie called her mommy. The adoption papers had been finalized just last week, making official what had felt true from that first night. "Sometimes, sweetheart, when people do wrong things, we have to help them learn to do better." Marcus squeezed Camila's hand under the table. Their relationship had grown from professional respect to deep love as naturally as seasons change. He understood her mission, supported her work, and had shown Annie that families could grow in beautiful, unexpected ways. The Sterling case became a landmark, Marcus said, reviewing the tablet that showed the latest compliance reports. They've hired 47% minority staff in leadership positions. Real change, not token gestures. Camila nodded, but her greatest satisfaction wasn't in the numbers. It was watching Annie color pictures of their new family, listening to Marcus's laugh, feeling the peace that came from turning pain into purpose. Derek's life, meanwhile, had become a cautionary tale whispered through Chicago's financial circles. Unemployed for 6 months, he'd burned through his savings and moved back in with his parents. His LinkedIn profile remained a graveyard of unanswered applications. Every Google search of his name led to articles about systematic discrimination and corporate accountability. Rebecca Carter had called that morning with news that made Camila smile. 3 more companies have reached out wanting diversity audits. Derek's spectacular downfall is changing entire industries. But the most powerful change was sitting right here at this table. Annie had asked for a family, and somehow, through rejection and revelation, through justice and healing, she had found exactly that. "Daddy, tell Mommy about the surprise," Annie whispered loudly, bouncing in her seat. Marcus grinned. "Annie wants to know if you'd like to help her plant a garden behind our house. She says flowers grow better when families plant them together." Camila looked around the table at her chosen family, the brilliant psychologist who had opened his heart again, the incredible little girl who saw love where adults saw complications, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey that had brought them together. A year ago, she had sat at a similar table, rejected and dismissed by a man who couldn't see her worth. Tonight, she was surrounded by people who chose her every single day. Derek Morrison had tried to diminish her value, but instead had catalyzed the creation of something beautiful: systematic change, professional triumph, and most importantly, a family built on choice, respect, and love. The best revenge truly wasn't destroying your enemies. It was building a life so fulfilling that their cruelty became irrelevant. As Annie chatted about flower varieties and Marcus discussed weekend plans, Camila realized that sometimes the universe responds to hatred by sending exactly the love you didn't know you needed. What started as one man's prejudice had become a woman's purpose, a family's foundation, and an industry's awakening. And if this story of transformation and second chances has touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more proof that love, justice, and family can bloom in the most unexpected places.